6 months ago, a woman named Vanessa slapped an old corn seller across the face and threw her food into the dirt like it was garbage. She thought no one would ever know. She thought she could get away with it. She was wrong, because that same corn seller had a daughter with a heart made of gold and a quiet strength that would one day bring an entire empire crashing down around Vanessa's feet. Today, Vanessa sits in the back of a police car, hands cuffed behind her back, mascara running down her cheeks. Staring out the window at the office building, she used to rule like a queen. Everyone is watching. Nobody is surprised. But 6 months ago, none of this had happened yet. 6 months ago, Vanessa was untouchable. She was the executive assistant to one of the wealthiest men in the city, a man named Nathaniel Cole. She controlled his calendar. She controlled who got to see him and who didn't. And for years, she quietly believed that one day, he would finally look at her the way he looked at no one else. She was wrong about that too, because across town, in a small house with a leaking roof, a woman named Odessa was waking up before sunrise, just like she did every single day, to roast corn on a rusted metal grill and sell it on the side of the road. It wasn't much, but it was honest, and it was enough to raise a daughter she was endlessly proud of. That daughter's name was Maya. Maya didn't know it yet, but her mother's corn stand was about to change both of their lives forever. She didn't know that the quiet, respectful businessman who stopped by every single week for roasted corn was falling for her, one visit at a time. She didn't know that a woman 2 floors above her, in a corner office with a view of the whole city, had already decided to hate her before they'd ever even met. And she certainly didn't know that jealousy, when left to rot in someone's heart long enough, doesn't just disappear. It waits, it watches, and eventually, it strikes. This is the story of a poor corn seller's daughter, a lonely billionaire who hadn't loved anyone in 10 years, and an assistant who was so blinded by envy, she nearly destroyed an innocent life just to feel like she still mattered. Some people call it karma, others call it fate, but by the end of this story, you'll understand exactly why Vanessa never saw it coming. Let's go back to where it all began. The sun hadn't even fully risen over the city when Odessa Grant pushed her cart down the same cracked sidewalk she'd walked for almost 15 years. The wheels squeaked in that familiar rhythm, the kind of sound that had become part of her morning prayers without her even realizing it. She set up her little stand on the corner, right across from the towering glass building that belonged to Cole Enterprises, and she began roasting corn the way her own mother had taught her. Slow, patient, over real coals, never rushed. People passing by rarely noticed her. To most of them, she was just background noise, just another woman trying to survive in a city that moved too fast to care. But her daughter noticed everything about her. Maya Grant was 26 years old, and if you asked anyone who truly knew her, they'd tell you the same thing. She had her mother's hands and her mother's heart. Hands that worked hard without complaint. A heart that gave, even when it had very little left to give. Maya worked at an upscale boutique inside the very same building her mother sold corn across from. It was a strange little coincidence that neither of them thought much about. Just 2 women, mother and daughter, working within a few hundred feet of each other every single day. One behind a cash register, folding designer scarves. The other behind a smoking grill, turning corn with tongs that had long since lost their shine. That morning started like any other. You didn't have to walk all this way. Mama, Maya said, kissing her mother's cheek before heading toward the building's entrance. I could have grabbed breakfast on the way and missed my chance to see your face before you disappear into that fancy building all day, Odessa smiled, adjusting the scarf around her head. Never. I'll come by after my shift. You always do. Maya smiled and walked away, her low heels clicking against the pavement. blending into the current of people rushing toward glass doors and elevators, and lives that looked nothing like her mother's small wooden cart. She didn't know it yet, but that ordinary Tuesday morning was about to set something into motion that neither of them could stop. Inside the boutique, the morning moved the way it always did, folding, steaming, greeting customers with a smile, even when her feet ached. Maya had a gift, one that had nothing to do with sales numbers or store quotas. She had a way of making people feel seen. Really seen. It wasn't a skill anyone had taught her. It was simply who she was. Around midday, an elegant young woman walked in, arms full of shopping bags from 3 other stores, clearly exhausted and clearly in a hurry. "I'm so sorry," the woman said, fumbling with her card at the register. "My card isn't going through. The network must be down or something." Maya glanced at the total. The woman was short by exactly $2,000, and her face had gone pale with embarrassment. "It's okay," Maya said gently. "Take your time." "No, it's not okay." The woman tried again. And again, the transaction failed. Without thinking twice, Maya reached for her own card behind the counter and quietly covered the difference herself. "There," she said, smiling. "All set." The woman blinked at her, stunned. "You don't even know me. You needed help." Maya said simply, "That's enough of a reason for me. What's your name, Maya? I won't forget this." "Maya, I promise you that." The young woman left with her bags, glancing back once before disappearing through the glass doors, and Maya went right back to folding sweaters, like nothing unusual had happened at all. She had no idea that the woman she'd just helped was named Harper Cole, the only daughter of the very man whose name was on the building she worked in. She had no idea that small, quiet act of kindness had just planted a seed that would grow into something far bigger than she could have imagined. That evening, as the sky turned a soft shade of orange over the city, a black car pulled up near Odessa's corn stand, the way it did almost every single week. Nathaniel Cole stepped out, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than Odessa made in an entire year. Yet he never once acted like it. He never rushed her. He never looked past her the way so many of his kind did to people like her. "Evening, Miss Odessa." "Evening, Mr. Cole." "Fresh off the fire. Just the way you like it." "You always say that, because it's always true," she said, wrapping the corn carefully before handing it over. He smiled, and for just a moment, the exhaustion of a long day at the office seemed to lift off his shoulders. There was something about this small corner of the city, this woman and her smoking grill, that felt more honest to him than every boardroom he sat in. "How's your daughter?" he asked. The way he always did, working hard, same as always. That girl doesn't know how to slow down. She gets that from somewhere, Nathaniel said with a knowing smile. Odessa laughed softly, waving him off. "Go on now, before your dinner gets cold." He paid her, always more than she asked for, and always in a way that never once made her feel like she was receiving charity. It was simply respect, quiet and consistent. Week after week, what neither of them knew was that 2 floors above the street where they stood, a pair of eyes was watching from a corner office window. Vanessa Cross had been Nathaniel Cole's executive assistant for almost 6 years. She managed his calendar, his meetings, his travel, every fragment of his professional life, down to the smallest detail. She told herself, night after night, that this closeness meant something, that surely, after enough time, enough loyalty, enough quiet devotion, he would eventually see her the way he never had. She watched him now, standing on the sidewalk below, laughing with that corn seller like it was the best part of his entire day. It made something twist painfully in her chest. Why does he even bother with her? she muttered under her breath, arms crossed as she stared down at the street, a roadside corn seller. Her assistant, a nervous younger employee named Priya, glanced up from her desk. She's been his regular for years. I think everyone in the building knows her. I don't like her, Vanessa said flatly. You don't even know her. I don't need to. Priya said nothing else. She'd learned a long time ago that when Vanessa's voice dropped to that particular tone, it was best to simply let the silence sit. The very next afternoon, Odessa came by the building earlier than usual, hoping to catch Nathaniel before his schedule filled up with meetings. She waited patiently near the lobby with a small bag of freshly roasted corn in her hands, just as she'd done dozens of times before. But Vanessa intercepted her before she ever reached the elevator. Mr. Cole is in a meeting, Vanessa said coldly, not even bothering to look up from her phone. I can wait, Odessa said gently. He usually likes it while it's still warm. He doesn't have time for this today. It won't take but a moment. Dear, Vanessa's hand shot out and knocked the bag from Odessa's grip. The roasted corn scattered across the polished lobby floor, kernels rolling in every direction, under the shocked stares of the few people passing by. I said he doesn't have time, Vanessa repeated, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Now you're wasting mine too. Odessa stood frozen for a moment, more stunned than hurt. Though the sting of humiliation burned just as deep, she said nothing. She simply knelt down, gathered what she could of the mess, and quietly walked away, her back straight, even though her heart had cracked just a little. She never told Maya what happened that day. She told herself it wasn't worth the trouble. She told herself that Vanessa was simply having a bad day, that people were allowed to be unkind sometimes, without it meaning anything deeper. She believed, with the kind of stubborn grace only a mother could carry, that mercy was always the better choice. She had no way of knowing that this single act of unchecked cruelty was only the very beginning. That night, Maya arrived at her mother's stand, just as the last bit of daylight faded from the sky, expecting to find her exactly where she always was. You're late today, Mama. Just a slow afternoon. Baby, Odessa said, forcing a smile onto her tired face. Come on. Help me pack up. Maya studied her mother's expression for a moment longer than usual, the way daughters sometimes do when something feels slightly off but they can't quite name it. You sure you're okay? I'm more than okay, Odessa said, pulling her daughter into a warm hug. I've got you. Don't I? What more could I possibly need? Maya smiled and hugged her back, letting the moment settle the small worry in her chest. Neither of them could have known that high above the street, behind a wall of glass and ambition, a woman was already beginning to see Maya's mother, and soon, Maya herself, as an obstacle standing between her and everything she believed she deserved. The corn seller's daughter had no idea that her ordinary life was about to change forever, and Vanessa had no idea just how far she was willing to go to stop it. 3 weeks passed, and in that time, something began shifting quietly between Maya and Nathaniel Cole. Though neither of them had said a single word about it out loud, it started small, a conversation that lasted a few minutes longer than it needed to. A question about her day that felt genuine instead of polite. A moment. One ordinary afternoon, when Nathaniel stopped by the boutique on his way to a meeting. Not for corn, not for his usual errand, but simply because he wanted to see her. Mr. Cole, Maya said, surprised to see him standing near the entrance of the store. I didn't expect you here. I was in the area, he said, though they both knew the boutique was nowhere near where his meetings usually took him. I wanted to see how you and your mother were doing. She's doing well. Still insists on working every single day. No matter how many times I tell her to rest. That sounds exactly like her, Nathaniel said, a warm smile crossing his face. You look tired, though. Are they treating you well here? They are, It's just retail. Lots of standing. Lots of smiling even when your feet are screaming at you. You always seem to enjoy it anyway. I do, Maya admitted. When a customer leaves happy, it makes the whole day worth it. That's one of the things I admire about you, he said quietly. You think about everyone else before yourself. Maya felt her cheeks warm slightly, unsure how to respond to something so simple, yet so unexpectedly sincere. Their conversation didn't last long. It never did. But it was enough, each time, to plant something new between them, something neither of them had a name for yet. Derek Vance called that evening while Maya was still finishing her shift, his voice carrying its usual mix of charm and impatience. I've got plans for us this weekend, he said. What kind of plans? My friend Trevor's throwing a birthday thing at a lounge downtown. I already told him I'd bring my girlfriend. You didn't think to ask me first. I was 99% sure you'd say yes. And the other, 1%. That's why I'm asking now, Derek said smoothly. So will you come? Maya hesitated for only a moment before agreeing, the way she usually did with Derek. Somewhere along the way, agreeing had simply become easier than pushing back. Derek Vance was an investment banker, sharp-suited and sharper-tongued, the kind of man who walked into every room like he already owned it. He and Maya had been together for over a year, and on paper, it looked like exactly the kind of relationship most people would envy. But lately, something about it had started to feel less like partnership and more like performance. That weekend, at the lounge, surrounded by expensive cocktails and even more expensive small talk, Derek leaned close to Maya's ear during a quiet moment. You know, he said, swirling the ice in his glass, you should consider yourself lucky. Lucky. A guy like me doesn't usually date someone from your background. Maya felt something tighten in her chest. My background. Come on. Maya, you know what I mean. You grew up helping your mom sell corn on a street corner. I move in completely different circles. I never thought our backgrounds mattered to you. They do. Derek said, as if he were explaining something obvious to a child. People might not say it out loud, but they notice. Most women would love to be sitting where you are right now. Maya said nothing for the rest of the night, the noise of the party fading into the background as Derek's words echoed over and over in her mind. She wasn't ashamed of her mother. She never had been. But hearing someone she loved speak about her own life, like it was something to be tolerated, something to be grateful for despite itself, cut far deeper than she wanted to admit. He actually said that to you? Tony asked the next morning, nearly dropping her coffee mug in disbelief. He said, you should feel lucky he's dating you. Not in those exact words, Maya said quietly, but that's exactly what he meant. Maya, that's not a compliment. That's a man reminding you where he thinks you belong. He's been good to me in a lot of other ways. That doesn't cancel this out. Tony set her mug down and looked her friend directly in the eyes. Love isn't supposed to feel like charity. Maya, the moment someone makes you feel like they're doing you a favor by loving you, that's the moment you need to start asking yourself hard questions. Maya didn't respond right away. Some part of her already knew Tony was right. But knowing something and being ready to act on it were two very different things. Especially when you'd already convinced yourself that this was simply how relationships worked. Meanwhile, across town, Nathaniel found himself thinking about Maya more often than he expected to admit. Even to himself, it had been 10 years since he'd lost his wife. 10 years of throwing himself into building an empire so vast that people whispered his name in boardrooms across the country. 10 years of telling everyone, including his own daughter, that he was perfectly fine being alone. You've had that same look on your face for the past week, his old friend Marcus said one evening over drinks. Something's different about you. Is it that obvious? To anyone who's known you as long as I have, absolutely. Nathaniel exhaled slowly, staring into his glass. There's someone, Marcus repeated, raising an eyebrow. That's the first time you've said that word in 10 years. It's not that simple. It never is. Who is she? Her name is Maya, Nathaniel said, and something in his voice softened, just saying it out loud. She's kind in a way that feels rare these days. Genuine. She doesn't perform for anyone. She just is who she is. So what's stopping you? She's much younger than me. Marcus. And her life is nothing like mine. Since when has any of that ever mattered to the kind of man you actually are? Nathaniel didn't have an answer for that. Not yet. Back at Cole Enterprises, Vanessa's patience had started wearing dangerously thin. She'd watched Nathaniel's attention drift further and further away from her over the past several weeks. And no matter how hard she tried to convince herself, it meant nothing. The evidence kept piling up in front of her. The way he asked about Maya's mother more often now. The way he lingered a little longer near the boutique whenever he had a reason to walk past it. The way his eyes lit up in a manner she hadn't seen since before his wife passed away. I've worked beside this man for years, Vanessa muttered to herself one evening, alone in her office long after everyone else had gone home. I've been the first person he sees every morning and the last person he speaks to before he leaves. And she's had him for what? A few weeks. She stared at her reflection in the darkened window, the city lights blinking behind her own faint outline. What does she have that I don't? There was no one there to answer her. And in the silence of that empty office, something inside Vanessa began to shift from quiet longing into something far more dangerous. A few days later, Maya worked up the courage to leave the boutique early and stop by Nathaniel's office, wanting to personally thank him for a small gesture he'd made toward her mother, a delivery of groceries after a particularly exhausting week at the corn stand. "Good afternoon," Maya said to the young man at the front desk. "I was hoping to see Mr. Cole for just a moment. If he's available, let me check for you," he said kindly, before directing her toward Vanessa's office. Since all of Nathaniel's appointments ran through her, Vanessa looked up from her desk, and for a brief moment, something cold flickered behind her otherwise composed expression. "Mr. Cole is currently unavailable," she said smoothly. "He's tied up for the rest of the afternoon." "Oh, I understand," Maya said. "Could you just let him know?" Maya stopped by. "It's nothing urgent." "Of course," Vanessa said, her tone perfectly professional. "I'll pass along the message." She had absolutely no intention of doing so. Maya left the office without another thought, unaware that the message she'd asked to pass along would simply vanish, swallowed by the quiet, calculated cruelty of a woman who had already begun deciding just how far she was willing to go. That same evening, Nathaniel returned to his office after a long meeting and glanced toward Vanessa's desk out of habit. "Anyone come by looking for me today?" he asked. Vanessa didn't even look up from her monitor. "No one, sir. It was a quiet afternoon." "I see," Nathaniel said, though something about her tone made him pause for just a fraction of a second longer than usual, before he let it go and walked into his office. He had no reason, yet, to doubt her, but somewhere deep down, in a place he hadn't quite learned to listen to, a small seed of suspicion had just been planted, one that would eventually grow into something neither of them could ignore. Maya went home that night, thinking nothing more of her visit. Vanessa went home that night convinced she'd successfully protected everything she believed still belonged to her. Neither of them knew that this single, quiet lie was only the first of many that would soon spiral far beyond anyone's control. The weeks that followed brought Maya and Nathaniel closer than either of them had planned. What began as quiet conversations near a corn stand had grown into something neither could deny anymore. He took her to dinner. He introduced her, carefully and respectfully, to his daughter Harper, who lit up the moment she recognized Maya as the kind stranger from the boutique who'd once covered her bill. "Wait," Harper said, staring at Maya in disbelief. "You're the one who paid for me, Dad. This is her. This is the woman from the store." Nathaniel looked between them, stunned. You two already know each other. She saved me from the most embarrassing moment of my life." Harper laughed. "I never even got the chance to properly thank you." Maya smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. It felt like the universe was quietly stitching pieces of her life together in ways she never could have planned. But not everyone was happy watching those pieces fall into place. Derek noticed the change in Maya before she ever said a word about it. She stopped answering his calls as quickly. She stopped making excuses for the things he said. And one evening, after yet another comment about her background slipping too easily from his mouth, Maya finally reached the end of her patience. "I deserve someone who's proud of where I come from," she told him, standing her ground for the first time in longer than she could remember. "Not someone who reminds me of it every chance he gets." "Maya, don't be dramatic." "I'm not being dramatic." "Derek, I'm being honest. This is over." She walked away that night lighter than she'd felt in over a year, unaware that Derek's bruised pride would resurface again. Much later, in a way neither of them could have predicted. Meanwhile, inside the walls of Cole Enterprises, Vanessa's world was quietly unraveling. She watched Nathaniel's schedule fill with reminders that had nothing to do with business. A birthday delivery here, a bouquet order there, white lilies and blush pink roses, addressed personally, in his own handwriting, to a woman Vanessa refused to even say the name of anymore. "Arrange for these to be delivered this morning," Nathaniel told her one day, sliding a small handwritten note across the desk. "Of course." "Sir," Vanessa said, forcing her voice to stay level. "Who should I address them to, Maya?" He said simply, "The corn seller's daughter." Vanessa stared at the note in her hands long after he'd walked away, her knuckles white against the paper. She had spent 6 years of her life memorizing this man's schedule, his preferences, his moods, the exact way he liked his coffee on stressful mornings. She had told herself, over and over, that loyalty like that eventually turned into something more, and now she was being asked to personally deliver proof that it never would. That night, alone in her apartment, Vanessa sat staring at her phone for nearly an hour before finally setting it down. "This isn't over," she whispered to no one. The final straw came on an ordinary afternoon, the kind that gives no warning before everything changes. Maya had gone to Nathaniel's office building, hoping to catch him for a few quiet minutes before her shift ended. She wasn't expecting anything dramatic. She simply wanted to see him. "I'm sorry. He's not available right now," the front desk assistant told her. "You're welcome to leave a message with Miss Cross." Maya nodded and made her way toward Vanessa's office instead, the same as she had once before. This time, Vanessa didn't even try to hide her contempt. "You seem to be getting very comfortable around here," Vanessa said coldly, not bothering to look up from her desk. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to intrude. I just wanted to see if he was free. Just because he was kind to you once doesn't mean you get to drop in whenever you feel like it." "That wasn't my intention," Maya said quietly, taken aback by the sharpness in her voice. Vanessa finally looked up, her eyes narrowing. "Let me save you the embarrassment. Mr. Cole is a billionaire. You're a boutique sales assistant. People like him don't end up with people like you. You're a corn seller's daughter." "Maya, stop dreaming." The words landed like a slap, sharp and deliberate. Maya didn't respond. She simply turned and walked out, her chest tight, her pride bruised but not broken. She had no idea that Vanessa's contempt had already curdled into something far more dangerous than cruel words. Maya left the building a few minutes later, stepping out into the golden light of late afternoon, replaying the conversation over in her mind as she made her way toward the bus stop a few blocks away. She never saw the car until it was far too late. It came fast, faster than any car reasonably should have moved on that street, and the impact threw her several feet, the sound of it echoing off the surrounding buildings like a crack of thunder. For a moment, The entire street seemed to freeze. "Someone call an ambulance," a stranger shouted, kneeling beside her. "Please, stay with us. Help is coming." Maya's vision blurred, pain radiating through her leg in waves that stole the breath from her lungs. The last thing she remembered before the world faded to black was the sound of tires screeching away in the distance. The car never once slowing down. Behind the wheel, gripping it so tightly her knuckles had turned white, Vanessa didn't stop driving until she was 3 blocks away. Her breath coming in short. Panicked gasps. "Nobody saw me," she whispered to herself, over and over, like a prayer twisted into something unrecognizable. "Nobody saw me." Odessa received the call less than an hour later, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped the phone. "Please," she whispered, rushing through the hospital doors. "Please tell me. My daughter is alive. She's stable," the doctor told her gently, guiding her to a quiet corner of the waiting room. "But she has multiple fractures in her left leg. The impact was significant. Will she walk again with surgery and proper rehabilitation afterward?" "Yes. We expect a full recovery, but we'd like to operate as soon as possible." Odessa sunk into a chair, tears streaming silently down her face. Gratitude and terror tangled together in a way she couldn't separate. Nathaniel arrived at the hospital within the hour. Having heard the news from Odessa herself, his usual composure cracked wide open with worry. "How is she?" "She's awake," Odessa said. "A little better, but scared." He walked into Maya's room slowly, and the moment she saw him, something in her chest loosened. "Just slightly. I came as soon as your mother called me," he said, taking her hand carefully. "I actually came to your office yesterday," Maya said softly. "I wanted to see you." Nathaniel's brow furrowed. "You came to see me. Your assistant said you weren't around. I was on my way to the bus stop when she stopped." The memory still too raw to finish out loud. Something cold settled in Nathaniel's chest. Vanessa had told him, without hesitation, that no one had come looking for him that day. He said nothing more about it in that moment, but the seed of suspicion planted weeks earlier had just grown into something he could no longer ignore. The investigation moved quickly once detectives were assigned to the case. Security footage from nearby buildings was pulled and cross-referenced. Paint fragments recovered from the scene were matched against vehicle registrations across the city. For a few tense days, suspicion floated toward Derek, given his recent, bitter breakup with Maya. But his alibi checked out clean, and detectives moved on. Then came the footage that changed everything. "Mr. Cole," an investigator said, standing in his office with a folder in hand. "Our forensic analysis has identified the vehicle involved in the hit and run, and the car is registered to your executive assistant, Miss Vanessa Cross." Nathaniel felt the floor tilt beneath him, the pieces of the past several weeks slotting into place with sickening clarity. The lie about no one visiting, the tension every time Maya's name came up, the jealousy he'd dismissed as nothing more than professional stress. "Bring her in," he said quietly. "I want the truth." Vanessa was arrested that same afternoon, escorted out of the building in handcuffs, while her former colleagues watched in stunned silence from every doorway and cubicle along the way. "I never thought I'd see the day," one employee whispered. "After everything she did." Another murmured, "I'm honestly not surprised. Something finally caught up with her." When Nathaniel finally visited her at the detention center, days later, he asked her only one question. "Why, Vanessa?" Her eyes filled with tears. The mask of composure she'd worn for 6 years finally, completely shattered. "I loved you," she said quietly. "I loved you for years. And I kept waiting for you to see me the way you saw her within weeks. When I realized you never would, jealousy consumed everything, good that was left in me. I made the worst decision of my life." I know I can't take it back. You didn't just betray my trust, Nathaniel said, his voice steady, but heavy with something close to grief. You nearly took an innocent life. I know. Vanessa whispered. I know. He left without another word, carrying with him not anger, but a quiet, exhausted sorrow for the years of loyalty that had curdled so completely into ruin. Back at the hospital, Maya's surgery had gone well, and slowly, painfully, she began the long road toward walking again. Nathaniel visited every single day, never once making her feel like a burden, never once rushing her healing. I still don't know how I'll ever repay everything you've done, Maya told him one evening, watching the sunset paint the hospital window in soft shades of orange. You don't have to repay anything, Nathaniel said gently. I just want you to get better. Maya studied his face for a long moment, something settling quietly into place inside her chest. She was beginning to understand, with complete certainty, exactly who she wanted standing beside her when she finally learned to walk again. 6 months had passed since the accident, and the woman standing in front of the mirror that morning barely resembled the frightened girl who had once lain broken on the pavement. Wondering if she'd ever walk again, Maya smoothed the fabric of her wedding gown, her hands steady now, her leg fully healed. Every physical therapy session, every painful step of relearning how to walk, finally leading her to this exact moment. You look like a dream, baby, Odessa whispered, her eyes glassy with tears as she adjusted her daughter's veil. Your father would have been so proud. He's here. Mama, Maya said softly. I can feel it. Outside, the entire garden had been transformed into something out of a storybook. String lights woven through the trees, white flowers cascading down every archway. Hundreds of guests seated beneath a sky, so clear it seemed to have been ordered specifically for this day. Nathaniel stood at the altar, and when the doors finally opened and Maya appeared, walking toward him on legs that had once been shattered beyond recognition, something in his chest broke open in the best possible way. You remember the first time I told you I was going to marry you, he whispered. Once she'd finally reached him, how could I forget? Maya smilet. I thought you'd lost your mind. I meant every word. I know, she said. You were never wrong. The reception stretched long into the night. Laughter and music spilling out over the garden as two families that once seemed worlds apart finally became one. Odessa danced with her grandson-to-be's future father, tears of joy she no longer bothered hiding. Harper toasted her new stepmother with a speech that left half the guests reaching for tissues. And somewhere near the edge of the celebration, a quiet, radiant peace settled over Maya that no amount of luxury had ever given her, because for the first time in her life, she understood that she had never needed to change who she was to be loved completely. A year later, life had transformed in ways none of them could have predicted. The corn stand that once stood on a cracked street corner had been replaced by something entirely different, a small, thriving grocery store with Odessa's name proudly displayed above the door. A gift from her daughter and son-in-law that she initially refused, then accepted with tears, then eventually grew to love running herself. I still miss talking to my customers, Odessa admitted one afternoon, wiping down a shiny new countertop. Then, don't get too comfortable, Mama, Maya laughed, because very soon, we're opening a second location. Maya herself had built something remarkable of her own, a small boutique that had grown, within just 2 years, into a respected fashion label with 3 thriving locations and an entire team behind her. The same eye for beauty and quality that once made customers feel welcome in someone else's store now anchored an empire, entirely her own. It was in the middle of exactly that success, that fate, once again, decided to intervene. We have a new client meeting today. Her assistant informed her one afternoon, a representative from Sterling Capital Bank. interested in financing our expansion. Maya barely glanced up from her paperwork. Send them in when they arrive. When the office door opened minutes later, the man who walked through it froze mid-step, his confident banker's smile faltering completely. Derek, Maya said, looking up calmly from her desk. Lara, I mean. Maya. He stammered, staring at the nameplate, then at her, then back at the nameplate again. I had no idea this was your company. I assumed you didn't, she said simply, gesturing toward the chair across from her. Please, have a seat. I understand your bank has a proposal for our expansion. Derek sat down slowly, visibly rattled, stumbling through his pitch in a way that felt almost unrecognizable from the confident man who once told her she should feel lucky to be with him. There was no anger in Maya's eyes as she listened, no bitterness, only the quiet, settled peace of a woman who had built her entire life on her own terms, and who no longer needed anyone's approval to know her own worth. That tells me you've truly moved on, Nathaniel said later that evening, when she told him what had happened. I have, Maya said, leaning into him on the couch, their son asleep in the next room. There wasn't any anger. It just reminded me how much life can change. When you finally decide you deserve better. You always deserved better, Nathaniel said, kissing the top of her head. I just got lucky enough to be the one who noticed. As for Vanessa, the woman who once believed that jealousy could rewrite the story of someone else's happiness, her name eventually faded from the halls of Cole Enterprises entirely, remembered only in the quiet, cautious whispers of former coworkers. She lost her career. She lost her freedom for a time. But more than anything, she lost the version of herself she might have become. If only she had learned, long before that fateful afternoon, that another person's joy was never something to be stolen. Somewhere, in the quiet of whatever new life she eventually rebuilt, perhaps she finally understood the lesson. Too many people learn far too late that bitterness poisons no one faster than the person carrying it. Kindness doesn't ask what you have, it asks who you are. A poor corn seller and her daughter never had much to give the world in terms of money or status, but what they gave freely: patience, respect, honesty, and love, without condition, turned out to be worth more than any fortune Nathaniel Cole had ever built in his lifetime. And in the end, that's the kind of wealth no one can ever take away. If this story touched you even a little, don't scroll past without hitting that subscribe button. There are so many more stories like this one waiting for you every single week. Drop a comment and tell us which character did you feel the most for Miss Odessa's quiet strength, Maya's grace under pressure, or even Nathaniel's patient, unshakable love. We read every single comment, and we'd love to hear your voice. And if you know someone who needs a reminder today that kindness always finds its way back to you, go ahead and share this video with them. Thank you for watching until the very end. We'll see you in the next story.